right now. Great. Geoff, it appears that Alec is still having trouble logging in, so perhaps we can begin this session, and I'll continue to let those in as we progress.
Wonderful, that sounds great. All right, so good afternoon, everyone. And once again, thank you for joining us. Just to keep in mind what time, it looks like we're a few minutes after 12, so we'll get started right away, because I would like to leave some time at the end for any questions from the people tuning in. So with Alec, we'll try and connect with Alec at the end of the session. And we're grateful that he could take time to join us today. So just to kind of quickly give you a little bit of an introduction, my name is Geoff Hackett. I'm a mental performance consultant at PacificSport on Vancouver Island. And I live in Nanaimo, and so I work with a lot of athletes around Vancouver Island on mental skills training, working with athletes and coaches. PacificSport is one of 5 centers from across the province. Dr. Shauna Taylor, who provided the last 2 sessions, she works out of the PacificSport Okanagan Center, which you can see at the bottom of the screen there in Kelowna. And I'm over on Vancouver Island. So both PacificSport centers, we were very honored to participate in this 3-part series and connecting with SPARC and providing some education for coaches and athletes on mental skills training. So as the title of today is Finding the Zone and Strategies to Perform Under Pressure. And what's a little tricky about this session today is that not everyone's playing their sport right now, or not like they normally would be. And so today is an opportunity to kind of take a step back and think about some of the mental factors that influence you playing your sport. And it's something to consider moving forward. So when you do eventually get back out into playing and competing, hopefully there's a few things that you can take from today and try and apply to your sport performance. So I have 3 kind of goals that I want to discuss today. I want to talk about this idea of pressure and its role in your sport and how that influences a big part of your performance. And that comes around through this idea of intensity. And I'm going to explain what that is in a moment here. I'm going to take those ideas and I want to talk about how they impact your performance. And so what are the things that happen to you as an athlete when you're competing? And for you to make sense of why we get nerves, why we get butterflies, why these sort of things happen to our bodies and our mind when we're competing. And then I also want to discuss, most importantly, what are some skills and things that you can take away to manage this part of your sport. And so that's kind of like a little quick summary of where I want to go today. So this idea of performing under pressure, and it's within the title of this workshop. And I wanted to just kind of have a little bit of a moment here to talk about what this means. And while it's important to know that, most of our memories from sport are, they can be very positive. They're things that we're proud of doing, the relationships that we make, the success that we have, whether that's specifically to, medals or championships, or whether that's just through a really positive experience. There are moments when you're under pressure in your sport. And so what that means is that it's not always comfortable. There are times when the sport provides a lot of enjoyment, but there are moments where sport creates this idea of pressure that makes you feel nervous, that can make you feel anxious. And what's most important to know is that that's normal. All right. So sport is meant to kind of drive us forward and achieve things we weren't, totally sure we were able to. And so this idea that pressure and its role in our sport, it has a significance to it. When you're competing as a high level athlete, you want to feel as if there's pressure in the situation. And the reason that is that you're doing things well if you're under pressure. All right, it means that you've had success. There's something on the line. There's something that is at stake, and that's a really cool feeling that you can generate through sport, and it can teach you a lot about how to use certain skills in sport outside of in other areas of your life. And so this idea of performing under pressure is something that is maybe not always the most comfortable thing, but it's an important part of us developing as an athlete. And the biggest thing around this idea of performing under pressure has to do with the self-awareness. How aware of you are you and how you're feeling within your sport? And so that's going to be a key thing that we're going to discuss later today is what this role of self-awareness has in managing pressure and recognizing that when you're feeling pressure, what can you do as an athlete to gain some sense of control over the situation. So this idea of pressure, what this implies with how this relates to you and your sport is this idea of intensity. And so intensity is your response to stress. It's how activated your brain and your body get when you're playing your sport. All right, and so I want you to think of this idea of intensity as like a dial on like a car stereo, for example. It's something that can get turned up quite high, and it's something that can get turned down low. All right, and so there's different, think of it on a spectrum like you see on the screen here. What's your heart rate? What's your body reacting to situations like when you're sleeping, when you're sitting around watching TV, when you're maybe more slightly alert in like a classroom or in a session where you're learning and you're engaged? Then what's it like when you start exercising or you start running around within your sport? And then what's that intensity like when you get into like a game situation? All right, and chances are it's going to fluctuate from different points throughout the game and different points throughout your day. But it's something to be aware of, and it's what this idea of pressure is when we're playing our sport. So this is something that happens naturally in your body. There's no right or wrong thing with feeling high or low intensity. But what it does is if you feel high intensity in certain moments of your sport, it can be very inconvenient because it doesn't always align with performing at a really high level. You can feel overly anxious, you can feel overly frustrated, you can feel overly nervous, and that can influence your sport performance in negative ways. So how we interpret this intensity is what we're here to talk about today. So what I want you to think of is the mental side of intensity, and think of it in a couple ways. Intensity can be high and intensity can be low, as you see on the screen here. Intensity can hurt your performance or it could help your performance. So think of this example here where before a big game, you're feeling confident, you're feeling excited, you're ready, your heart's racing, you feel butterflies in your stomach, you're ready to go. And that's a high, helpful sort of intensity, all right? Think of what a low helpful intensity is like. The morning of the game, you're feeling relaxed, you're feeling calm, all right? And as the day progresses, your intensity starts to raise. What we're here to also discuss, though, is how intensity can hurt your performance. And that's what we want to provide these tools for when we're working, within our sport. A high hurtful intensity is when we're feeling really physically and mentally anxious around our sport. And alternatively, we can feel bored, we can feel overconfident, which can also really negatively impact our performance. So we want to have an understanding of where we are on this square here and work to identify things that we can do to either raise our intensity if we need to, maintain our intensity, or reduce our intensity as we're performing. All right, so I want to spend a little bit of time talking about this side, the hurtful side of intensity, and why we may feel that way around our sport. So for low intensity, a big one is you can feel overconfident, all right? And so, a common example is if you're playing a team sport, for example, or an individual sport, and you're coming up against an opponent that you beat really easily last time. Feeling very overconfident, thinking that it's going to be the same sort of type of game, and you can overlook certain parts of your preparation and your sport that maybe allow some overconfidence to creep in. Shauna Taylor spoke a lot last week about low motivation and how motivation is challenging right now because we don't have that connection to our sport. So low intensity can be because you don't see the situation as totally important. An example within a tournament is like, say you have a heartbreaking loss and you have to reset the next day for a consolation game, and it can be sometimes tough to find that motivation to compete, and so you can have a lower intensity than what's required for that game. And you can be physically sore, physically tired, and all those sort of things can contribute to a lower intensity level. Really high intensity can be down to a lack of confidence, which is your self-belief in your own ability. All right, so that's going to make you anxious and worry and fear of failure, which are things that we don't really want to have when we're competing in our sport. Having an internal focus means you're just overly focused on your own thoughts and feelings. And so in your sport, you can start to develop like this tunnel vision where you're not paying attention to certain things on the field or in the racetrack or whatever your sport is. All right, and so you can make easy mistakes that way. because you're just not, you're too focused on yourself, and you're not bouncing between how you're feeling and what's going on the field. And then the opposite of that is an external focus. You're totally distracted by people on the sideline. You're distracted by something, a teammate, a coach, someone watching, the referee, and you're not able to pay attention to how you're feeling. And so you can just develop this high sense of intensity that makes you anxious and physically uncomfortable. So how does this look? How does this really impact our performance? And I want to talk about this just briefly before. So what today is we're going to outline these three areas within your sport. And I'm going to spend a little bit of the time talking about that in a moment. But we talk about the level of intensity. It can be low and it can be high. And we talk about the quality of our performance goes from low to high. So if you have a low level of intensity, too low for what's required in the situation, your performance will suffer. All right. And as your intensity increases, all right, you find that sweet spot, which is the zone, which is what we're trying to hear to talk about today. And this is where, you know, you feel really focused, you feel really engaged, you kind of don't have a concept of time. You know, you feel really focused on how you play your sport. You're not too worried about the result. You're really focused on just competing, working hard, and you have fun in this place. And then intensity can increase, which, as you can see, can drop your level of performance. So you can feel overly frustrated, anxious, you can feel really nervous. All these sort of things can really obviously drop your performance. And so for us as athletes and coaches listening in, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk us through an exercise that I would do with an athlete or with a team to talk about this. And since, you know, for the sake of time, we're not really face to face, I just wanted to kind of walk through and provide some information about how you could take this as an athlete. So what I'm going to spend some time doing is talking about what it's like in each of these three zones. And then I'm going to provide you with some tools, some simple just suggestions that you can do in each of these three areas. All right, and so an exercise that I do is called Know Your Number. And so what it does is it takes this curve like this from the very low end of intensity to the very high end of intensity, and you put a number on it. You put these numbers here. So these numbers represent, you know, at a 1, very low level of intensity, very slow, you know, and at certain points in your day around a big competition, that's appropriate to feel like that. If you're feeling like you're up like at 8, 2 hours before your game, you're going to burn out mentally and physically. You don't have enough gas in the tank for when you need to compete. And then as competitions start, you know, you get into the game, you want to find this middle ground. And I don't mean that everyone's middle ground is a 4, 5, or a 6. It's going to be very individualistic. It's going to be very dependent on your own personality, what your own tendencies are, and what the context of your sport requires as well. All right. So, but just for general sake, there's a low end here, there's a middle end here, which is where we want to try and find ourselves as an athlete. And then there's obviously a high end here where even if we're feeling very confident, there are things that can happen that can push us over that edge. So what I do with an athlete is I'll present this, and then they would get a worksheet, which I'm going to provide for everyone at the end of today, where they take that curve and it just goes from the top to the bottom of the page. All right. And so what they do is they identify to start. They identify what's the zone for me. All right. So once again, 0 is like to 1, extremely low level of energy. All right. Obviously not enough to play our sport. 10 is the most extreme level of emotion and intensity that I can experience playing my sport. I understand at certain moments you might spike up there, but for the idea of being performing well over the course of a game and multiple games, what's that middle ground that allows us to really remain focused and engaged and committed in our sport? And you notice here that, you know, it's 5, 6, 7 here. So that implies that, you know, I've had a good warm up. All right, I've prepared. All right, and there's a certain level of excitement that is required to play. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk through each of these three areas with the context of the soccer player. That's my sport. That's the one I know the best. So I'm going to just walk through what an athlete could feel in each of these three areas. And remember, this idea of self-awareness is really important. I'm going to spend a little bit more time in a second here. So creating self-awareness, what does that mean? All right. And I want you to break it down into 3 things. Okay. What are my thoughts like? What am I doing? How am I playing? What's my play look like? And what are the emotions that I'm experiencing? And the 3 of these are related to one another. They influence each other. All right, so if you have a negative emotion, it can bring about negative thoughts, which direct how you're going to perform. All right, and so the idea is not to control this. There's no joystick, there's no steering wheel for this necessarily. It's creating awareness of how you're feeling. There's going to be times throughout the game where you're going to feel negative. All right, and it's not this idea of, okay, I need to control that, bottle it up, and get rid of it. It's like, okay, I just need to be aware of it, and then take control of what I can do in the moment. And that's this idea that we're here. We're not trying to overly control this. We're trying to be aware of it and then have a response to that awareness. All right. And that's the biggest thing as an athlete, is that there's going to be things that go wrong. You can't control that, but you can control your response. All right. And that's some of the ideas that I want to share with you today. So I'm going to go through each of these three zones. I'm going to provide some examples from a soccer player. What are some thoughts that could be in one of these zones? What are some actions, like what would their play look like? And what would their emotions possibly be in these three areas? So let's start with this psych up zone here. So this is where we need to raise our intensity. If you notice yourself playing like this on the field, all right, there needs to be some things done to raise your level of intensity. All right, you need to raise it up into this, not obviously go too far, but it needs to pick up. So some thoughts that an athlete could feel, they could be easily distracted. So they could be thinking about something that's totally unrelated to the soccer game. All right, they could be feeling overconfident, like, oh, this is an easy game, we're gonna crush these guys or girls, whoever you're playing. You can feel really disengaged too, just feel like you're floating out there. You're not really like into it. You're just kind of just going through the motions. Some different emotions, you could feel kind of like down, you could feel sad, you could feel bored, you could feel tired, really sluggish. All right, and what would my play look like if I was in this zone here? All right, so my play could be slow, like take a while to get the ball out of my feet. I'm missing some passes. All right, I'm not accurate, I'm giving the ball away. I'm not defending with any sort of urgency. All right, so like I'm slow to close people down with the ball. I'm just kind of drifting out there. All right, and so as an athlete, once again, if you feel like this when you're playing your sport, it's no reason to panic. It's just an idea of like, okay, this is where I'm at, and we're going to talk about what I can do in this situation here. So a lot of this, if you feel like you need to really elevate your intensity level when you're playing, there's a few things you can do on the field to raise your heart rate, and I'll speak about those in a second. But a lot of it has to do with what you do off the field, especially prior to the game. And your preparation, the amount of time that you think about what you have to do to be your best, slowly starts to get your mind thinking about all these little details that are hopefully within your control, that allow you to step onto the field and be ready to go. All right, and so your sport and your game starts well before the referee blows the first whistle. All right, and so thinking about these different things, what's my physical preparation have to look like? Do I have to have a foam? Do I need to do some stretching? Do I have a foam roller that I use before a game to like loosen out a sore part of my body? What type of foods am I eating in the lead up to the game? How am I fueling my body with enough carbs, enough fat, and enough protein to be able to compete? All right, what's my hydration look like? Especially in this hot weather, you need to drink way more water than you probably think you do in order to have the energy to compete. Mentally, what do I have to do to kind of settle into the game? What do I have to be thinking about before the game? What's in my control? What are these things that I need to kind of consider from a mental perspective before the game? From the social strategies, and the reason I included this is for the context of an egg or something like a major games. You get to these games, your family's with you, everyone wants a piece of your time. And sometimes you have to kind of set these boundaries between, having your own time to personally prepare and then also sharing the experience of these games with your family. So it's going to vary for different people. Some people really like to spend a lot of time with their family before a game. It helps them feel connected and supported and they're ready to go. Other people like to just have a little bit of time in isolation, just to mentally rehearse what they have to do. And that's just each to their own, but just having an idea of what your social strategies are to prepare to be your best. And then for sports that require equipment, like do you check your bag before you compete? Do you make sure you have an extra piece of equipment that you could need at the last minute? You know, do things need to be repaired? What are you maintaining your equipment outside of your sport? So all these things will allow you to arrive to your competition in a good mindset that allow you to kind of get into that zone fairly quickly. Another thing that we can do is, and this is something that is maybe new, is use this idea, and it's been called visualization a lot in the past, but what the word that I use within athletes is imagery. And visualization is how can you close your eyes and picture yourself, see yourself playing your sport. All right, it's how you kind of create a mental picture in your head of preparing, of how you want to see yourself playing when you're competing. What are the things you have to do while to compete? It doesn't really focus so much on the outcome, but it should focus on, you know, what does your best game look like? What's your highlight reel look like when you're competing? Where imagery is useful is that it also incorporates what you see, but what you feel playing your sport. So how do you feel the touch of your equipment when you're playing? How do you recreate that experience? All right, and that's a super important part, I should say, of preparing to play. All right, so it can help you maintain when you're injured, or right now when we're not totally competing. What you're actually starting to do is use parts of your brain that you use to perform the skill. All right, and so you need to pair this with physical practice for it to really be effective, but it creates that blueprint in your mind where the parts of your brain that's required to kick a ball, to swing a bat, to make a catch, whatever it is, are being used when you practice imagery. All right, so it's a very powerful tool that athletes can use in order to prepare. So what are some things to think of? Positive outcome. All right, so you want to see yourself doing things that you can control. All right, so seeing yourself having your best game. All right, so, and as a soccer example, it could be that, you know, I'm brave with the ball, I'm passing the ball forward, I'm taking players on one-on-one, I'm defending with lots of intensity. Incorporate your equipment. All right, so if you're a baseball player, for example, or a softball player, all right, if you visualize, you know, yourself at bat, like have a bat in your hand and get the feel for the weight of the bat and the feel of the bat. And it's going to start to put your mind in that place of what things, little details you need to consider to have an effective at bat. All right. Your confident image is related to your body language. All right. So what does your good body language look like? All right. Your shoulders back, your head's up, you're making eye contact. All right. That's a huge part of developing some sort of idea of like how you want to respond to adversity, how you want to respond to pressures with positive body language. Because you can all picture either yourself or teammates who have negative body language, and you look at them and you're like, okay, well, they maybe don't want to be here, or they're not happy right now, or, you know, the game is getting to them. All right. So whether that's your own teammate or your opposition, you want to have a clear idea of what your body image looks like for you to be effective and confident playing your sport. And then you want to include the environment where you play. All right, so think of your home court, your home field. What are the attributes of that field that put you there, right? It could be like, you know, the type of trees outlining the field. It could be picturing like what a beautiful sunny day looks like at the field. It could be, you know, what the home change rooms look like. Start to try and pick out elements of what makes you feel comfortable in that home when you're competing. Few other things to consider is like how you just reframe the situation. How can you raise the importance of what you're doing? How can you re-motivate yourself? All right, and so this kind of ties to last week when Dr. Taylor spoke around some of the mastery goals that you can set as athletes. So how can you really focus on the details of your sport rather than the outcome, but what can you do to raise the importance of what you're doing? Bringing it back down to earth. So really making sure that, you know, you have total kind of respect for what's going on. You're not totally overconfident. You're focused on the present moment. Like you're making sure that your head and your feet are in the same place. All right, and that can be an important part of raising that intensity. Some ideas of what are some mantras or words that you can say to yourself to raise your intensity, some keywords there. All right, really driving, committing to what you're doing. And then how you incorporate music, all right, into your pregame routine. What music gets you pumped up and ready to play? So let's move on to the zone here. So this is like, if we can arrive here as an athlete, we're doing excellent. All right. So regardless of whether you're winning or losing, your goal should try and find this place in your sport more times than not. All right. So this is think back to your best performances, and you're going to find your own examples here of what this is like for yourself. But your thoughts, for example, as a soccer player, it's present. So it's focusing on what I have to do on the field at a certain moment in time. And thinking about what happened 10 seconds ago is not staying present. All right, so it's always changing. That picture's always moving forward. all right? And it's just totally committed and engaged in the game. It's positive, so it means that you're focused on what you can control and what's in the present moment, all right? And there's a high self-belief usually when you're feeling like this. The emotions that you could feel, you could be really excited, determined, be really enjoying what you're doing, all right, and really sort of kind of embracing the challenge that you're feeling. And then what would my play look like? Well, I mean, like if I was playing outfield, like I would get the ball and I would look to be playing the ball forward as quickly as possible to teammates up the field. I would be, taking players on one-on-one. I'd be dribbling. You'd watch the game and think like that person's, they're brave right now. Like they're not afraid to lose the ball. When they do lose it, like they're getting back quickly. They're working really hard off the ball. They're very sharp in their game with their crossing, their passing, their finishing. It's all really clicking for them. And so from a mental perspective, what do we want to do when you're in this place? What can you do to stay here? And so when we're talking about being focused and being on task, you want to link your focus to your senses. What can you touch? What can you see? What can you say in that moment? And like your own breath, like how do you feel? How can you connect with your breath? All right. And so what I want us to kind of consider here, and I'm going to walk through some examples because I know we have athletes from a number of different sports in the context of linking your focus to the physical senses, all right, is going to be different for every sport. So let's start here with a racing sport. All right, so this could be like a canoe kayak, this could be track and field, athletics, it could be a bike race. All right, think of like what different keywords represent different stages of the race. All right, so as an example here, before you're reminding yourself you're ready, you're good to go, you're alert. At the start of the race, you're looking to kind of start quickly, start strong. So you have lots of power, lots of energy. All right, and so a keyword to remind you of that is to really connect with that idea. All right, in the first section of the race, you're looking to set the tone of the race. You're looking to position yourself well. All right, and you're looking to try and find yourself around certain people. So you could have that sort of keyword of kind of like set the tone, and then you're looking for certain people. You're looking to kind of keep certain people in distance. All right. Once the middle of the race happens, you're looking to just maintain, be calm, be smooth, right? Feeling the rhythm of your pacing, really kind of just connect with how you're feeling, how to run at that moment in the race. And then that final push of a race is when you're trying to reel the people in front of you. All right. And so, you're looking like you got your eyes locked on like the back, the number on the back of their shirt or whatever it is. And you're just kind of really driving forward in that part of the race there. So you can think of your own examples. I'm just providing a few things, and it's not meant to be rocket science. It's meant to be really specific, but it's all present. It's what you can see. It's what you can feel in the moment. And when you're there, you're not thinking of distractions. You're not thinking about past mistakes. You're not thinking about consequences of future races. You're totally set in the zone. And so you really want to create this idea of you connect focus with what you can see and feel in the moment. Another example, and this relates to a lot of different sports, is a part of the game where you have complete control of the timing and the tempo of the game. So I can give an example of a free throw in basketball. I could give an example of a pitcher in baseball getting ready to deliver the ball to the plate. I could give an example of a volleyball serve. All right, so there's many different examples here. It could be like a BMX racer, like in the gate at the start of the race. All right, and so there's creating a routine that kind of just reconnects you and grounds you to the moment in order to perform is an important skill to have. All right, and so I'll give an example of a golfer about to putt the ball. All right, so they get to the green, all right, and they're in this preparation phase, the prepare phase. So they gain a physical cue, all right? So they pick up their ball, they feel their ball, all right, and then take a deep breath, all right? They pick the ball out of their pocket, put the marker, down, or pick up the marker, put the ball in the green, all right? And then they take a deep breath and they relax and they focus their eyes on what they need to see. So they're aligned to the hole, the line of their putt. All right, and you're going to take in a lot of different information on the speed of the green, the wind, the break of the green, all that sort of stuff. But they relax, they focus their eyes on the visual cue. And then as they stand over the putt, they they have a word, maybe it's smooth or it's solid or something that just kind of brings around a really good putting technique. And then they putt the ball. All right, so you can have your own examples here around maybe a volleyball serve or a different example within your sport. And you think about what happens when you don't do these things, all right? And you may not have total awareness that you're doing them, but there's a certain routine that whether, a free throw, you bounce the ball, you spin it in your hand, you bring your eyes to the rim. If you rush that or you skip certain parts, guarantee you're probably not going to execute as well as you wanted to. You're going to miss, you're going to make mistakes, and then you can start to spike your intensity a little bit because you're like, oh, why am I making mistakes? I can't believe I did that. And all of a sudden you're starting to raise your intensity a little bit, and it can hurt your performance. So this is something to consider moving forward. And then for a team sport, so when I'm talking about maybe like a soccer game or a lacrosse game, something where there's a lot of the game is really fluid, all right, and you have to react to certain situations. So as an athlete, you've got to kind of create your own structure within that game, all right. And so some examples here of like what's your goal for the first 15 minutes of the game, all right. You have different goals from a physical and a mental point of view, all right. So you emphasize high energy. You really focus on just working at early start of the game, really focus on, getting settled into the game, I think is a big thing. Try and get on the ball as early as possible. For me, I'm a goalkeeper in soccer, and at the start of a game, I always like to get the ball in my hands early in the game. Just like get out of your head, get the ball in your hands, feel like you're involved, and then you can just kind of like settle into the game, and it just kind of flows from there. What's your response to after scoring a goal or after conceding a goal? What are some things, and how can you reconnect with the game, focusing on what you can see and what you can touch, right? Keeping things really, really simple. Like you're trying to get on the ball as much as possible. You're trying to make sure that you're really physical when you're defending, really looking for that contact when you're defending. Different examples here of how you can look to really stay focused when you're competing. So move now to what are some things we can do when we go too far. All right, so when we need to lower our intensity level. So we've gone to this like psych out zone, as it's called. And this is where, excuse me, we recognize that our heart rate is probably too elevated. Our mind is racing too quickly. And, we're struggling. We're kind of losing our grip on the game a little bit. So some thoughts that you could consider. You think about past mistakes. You think about worst case scenarios. You think about what if situations. All right, you could be blaming others. You could be frustrated. You could be just kind of like forcing the issue a little too much in the game, and things aren't flowing naturally. You're like trying too hard. Emotions that you could feel, or you could be anxious. You could be worried. You could be scared. You could be nervous. Nervous to the point where it's like, I understand like nerves, they play a role in getting you ready to play. But when they start to spill over and have a negative impact on your performance, then you've gone too far with those nerves. And you need to find a way to bring everything back down. And then some actions that from a soccer player perspective, like they could be really withdrawn from the game. Like they're not moving a whole lot. They're not looking to get on the ball. They're not looking to play under pressure. They could be like trying way too hard. And so what I mean by that is like, they're just kind of fighting the game. They're playing passes like way too hard. Their first touch is poor. They're really like reckless in defending. All right, like they're overly physical, and they're getting, they're giving away bad fouls, or they're picking up dumb yellow cards, and they're at risk of getting sent off. All those sorts of examples there from a soccer player perspective. So what do you do in this as an athlete in this situation here? And it's important. I'm only going to talk about a couple of things, but really, really valuable things that what athletes need to do in this situation. So we talked about earlier, when you get up to here, your heart rate is really, really elevated. All right. And it's to the point where it's activated parts of your brain that make you think and worry. And so what you need to do in this situation is you need to remember and reconnect with your breath. You need to breathe to calm down. I'm going to talk about how you do that. The biggest thing here, and we're going to speak a little bit more about this, is this 3-2-5 breath. And I'm going to explain what that is. But when you're trying to breathe to calm down, when you're stressed, you breathe into your chest. I know it sounds really kind of silly, but you breathe short and shallow into your breath. And so it's just like, and it's very hard to keep your focus if you breathe like that for too long, because it's going to elevate your heart rate. So what we want to try and do is we want to use our diaphragm to breathe. And I'm going to explain what that looks like in a minute. But essentially, you're trying to breathe and have your diaphragm pull more air into your lungs to calm your body down. Some other things you can do before a game are like some muscle relaxation techniques. So you can find like it's called progressive muscle relaxation, and you can find clips on YouTube for free. You can just download it on your phone. And it's where you would go through your body and you tense, like say your arms for like hard for like 10 seconds, and then you relax and breathe into that area of your body for 20 seconds. And what you do is you kind of create this, this discrepancy between having your muscles really tense and really relaxed, and it slowly just kind of calms your body down, and it reduces muscle tension and eases your mind. And it's something that athletes can do as a technique if they can't sleep the night before a game. If you find that you're tossing and turning and you're nervous, you want to get out of bed and you want to do some muscle relaxation and just calm your body down, calm your mind down, so you can get a good night's sleep before you play. Another important thing to consider is to smile when things are tough. Like you actually connect certain parts of your brain that will calm you down. When you smile or when you see someone smile, it kind of reduces that tension a little bit. And you have to kind of figure out when that's appropriate to do in your sport, but it's an important little tool to have in your back pocket. So when we're talking about breathing to calm down, I'm talking about using our diaphragm here. So the diaphragm is a band of muscle that separates your chest cavity from your stomach cavity. And if everyone sitting at home can just put their hand on their stomach and breathe in, and when you breathe in, feel your stomach expand and your belly and your hand rise, and then exhale and feel your hand fall. All right, and you just want to just do that a couple times. And what you're doing is you're activating your diaphragm when you do that. So you breathe in, diaphragm pushes down, stomach rises, exhale, diaphragm pushes back up and pushes air out. And when you do that, onto the count of you inhale for 3, hold for 2, and then a controlled exhale for 5, you're going to reduce your heart rate, you're going to reduce your muscle tension, and you're going to lower your intensity level. So your job as an athlete is to figure out when you can do that. So as a soccer player, for example, the ball goes out of play, there's a substitution, there's a whistle, and I'm finding like, hey, like right now I'm really tense, I'm fighting the game. Take 10 seconds to 20 seconds to breathe, where you just focus on breathing in for 3, you hold for 2, and you exhale for 5. And a really cool tool that you can use as an athlete is this Breathe Plus app. And it's a free app that you can download on the App Store or the Android Google Play website, whether you have a phone or iPhone, or an Android phone. You can get this app both ways. And I have a little video here. So what you do is you press play, and you can set the counters to 3, 2, 5. And what it does is it's a really good tool for athletes to kind of get the timing right of what this is. Because if you're breathing out too quickly, you're going to elevate your heart rate. So you breathe in and you hold for 2, and then it's this controlled exhale. That's so important. When you're trying to calm your body down, your exhale has to be longer than your inhale, at least as long or longer than your inhale. All right, so you're breathing in like this, hand on your stomach, you feel your belly rise, you hold, and just slow exhale and allow your hand to fall and your belly to go back down into your body. All right, and so what you're trying to do is work on practicing this. This is a skill that you need to practice outside of your sport before you decide to use it. All right, but it's a great tool that athletes can use. And so I really encourage to download this app. It's free, and it just gives you this really cool kind of cadence with the timing. So a few other things just to kind of finish up here, what we can do to kind of reframe the situation is think about what you've done in the past if you're feeling overly anxious, like especially before a game. You know, if you've been there before, if you've had success in the past, like think about what you've done in those moments, all right? And just it kind of gives you some self-belief, all right? And that's an important thing to remember, is to kind of write these things down. Like, what are you proud of doing? It doesn't have to be like that you want a trophy or anything like that, but it could be strong performances. It could be something that, you gave everything in this game and you were really proud walking away from the field, that, you really gave all your effort to that moment. When you see teammates and when you see competition who you feel you match well with, when you see them have success, it can give you the belief that you can do it too. All right. And that's something that's important to consider, is like when you think like, oh yeah, like these guys have success or these girls have success, I can do that too. All right. And so just paying attention to what other people do around you can also give you that source of confidence. And then obviously this main thing here is keeping things positive. So what's in your control? All right, other players, referee, not in your control. What's in your control is your attitude, your response, how you breathe, how you prepare. All right, keeping your thoughts in control. All right, and what's in the present moment. And that's the biggest thing, is just letting go what happened in the past, not paying attention to what's in the future, but really connecting to the present. And a great way to do that is to tie your awareness to what you can see and feel, your senses in the moment. All right, some other things to kind of consider here, some mantras that you can start to develop: how to trust things, how to breathe, how to calm, to relax, are all tools that you can use to lower that intensity level. And then just to kind of wrap up here, like some intensity tips, like what can you take away from this? And I think the preparation is super important. When you arrive at the field without really thinking about what you have to do or how to prepare, you can find yourself overwhelmed quickly, especially as you get to higher levels in your sport. You can't always get away with maybe some bad habits off the field. So you want to have this pregame routine, and what you do off the field or off the court or racetrack or whatever the place where you play, what you do off the field has a major impact on what you can do on it. All right, so getting adequate rest, water, all that stuff. Once you know you've done the work to prepare, you're going to feel confident when you go out to your sport. And this second point here, focus on how you play and not the result, is super, super important. Really connect with what you can control, and that's the techniques that you have, the game plan that you have, the effort that you give. Focus on how you play. And if you focus on that, the results will take care of themselves. All right, so it's important to just be focused on what you can control and let go of what you can't control. And you're going to find that, you know, you're just going to be able to connect with the game a lot quicker. And then expect intensity to rise. So you want to have a plan to calm down. Intensity rising is not something you can control, but the biggest thing here is you want to just have awareness of it when it does rise. When athletes lose it mentally, it's because they've lacked that awareness. They haven't kind of had the pulse on how they're feeling, and all of a sudden they're so far over the edge that it's tough for them to recover. All right, so have that awareness of how things are going, and do the little things to breathe when you can, to reframe the situation when you can, just to kind of calm yourself down and reconnect with the game. All right, and so just remember, when you're breathing, you want that exhale to be longer, bigger than your inhale, and using your diaphragm to breathe, like I just showed, is the way to do that. So kind of brings us to last 10 minutes, and I wanted to leave, I know there's a lot of information here, and everyone's going to get these slides, and I'm happy to follow up with any questions if things come to mind afterwards, but I wanted to leave a good chunk of time to answer any questions that anyone might have about what we just talked about.
If anyone has any questions, you can use the hands up icon, and Geoff or I will unmute you. Geoff, can you take a moment to review the tips again for getting into the psych zone?
Yeah, so that would be back. I'll just go back in the slides here. So is this the correct, like looking to raise into it? Yeah, okay, great. So a lot of work that that an athlete can do when they arrive at the field or at the game, and they realize that, you know, they're kind of in this place here. There's a couple ways to look at it. I'll go through these again, but what a lot of the work that really allows athletes to arrive and enter that zone quickly is through what they do off the field before the game, or out of competition before the game, I should say. When you get to this place here, all is not lost. You can do things to kind of raise this intensity level, obviously, but sometimes athletes kind of need to learn. Athletes learn that lesson kind of the hard way, where they really go through their sport and they don't have a performance that they're totally proud with, and they need to look at how they prepare to get themselves ready to play. And so some things that we can consider here all right, is what you can do in order to feel prepared. All right. So what are the different parts of your sport that you need to consider in order to feel really focused? And what are the things that could provide, potential distractions? All right. And so the fuel is so important. So what you do to prepare your body is extremely important. And what that implies is that, you're thinking about your sport, you're thinking about what you have to do. You're starting to think about the game before you play the game. And that's a very valuable skill to develop as an athlete, and starting to just kind of get organized with what are things to consider. When you also want to consider, like, what are some mental strategies to do, talk about some visualization. So I'll just go to this one here. So when you're trying to create like a highlight reel of yourself playing your sport, like what's the content of that? What does it look like for you when you're trying to recreate what it's like to play your best? And so there's things here to consider. You want to have a positive outcome. It's pointless to think of doing something and seeing yourself failing. All right. So it's really important to consider yourself, playing under pressure, but playing well. Go back to like some of your best performances and what are some things that stood out from that. So it could be, if you're a softball player, it could be that you had high quality at bats, like you were just making good contact on the ball, you were seeing the ball well, you felt really confident at the plate. All right. And so what does that look like in a greater sense? Like, how can you incorporate some of your equipment into that? So what does the weight of your bat feel like in your hand? All right. What does it feel like to actually produce like a really high quality swing on the ball? All right. What does your body language look like when you're competing? Seeing yourself with confident body image, shoulders back, making eye contact, head up. All those important things are good to consider when you're trying to visualize and create this image of yourself playing before you get to the field. And so you can do this like 2 hours before. You could do this, within the warm up. You could do it like the night before. And the idea is, you just spend like maybe a couple minutes, like, hey, like this is how I want to play today. This is how I want to see myself play today. All right, and you just start to go through those routines. And as you practice them and you refine them, you're going to get a sharper, stronger image that's going to have a bigger impact on your preparation. And then I think finally I talked about like, how can you just kind of reframe the situation here, raise the importance of competition. All right. So what that sort of means is, how do you kind of reset your goal for it? So it could be that, you want to make sure, like if you're like, we'll go to the baseball example too. If you have if you don't think the game is too important in that moment, it's like, okay, well, let's try and get on base twice in your 4 at bats that you'd have. How can you just kind of reset those goals in the moment that just kind of engage you more with what you need to do? I hope that answers your question. So Laura, what advice do you have for athletes who are affected by their parents watching? I think it's a really good question. And I think what is important to consider there is some communication between parents and, between the athlete. Like, I think it's important for the athlete to, like, a lot of times parents, they're so invested and it's all comes from a place of good. All right. But what it can feel like is a lot of pressure from the athlete. So parents might not have the awareness that, their constant sort of like over the shoulder presence, or maybe some of the things they say can really have an impact on the athlete. And I think the best advice for parents is to have an idea of, like, have those conversations with your kids around, what you like, you're there to support them. But also I think from athletes, it's important for them to have those conversations. They can be difficult. It's like, Dad, when I'm playing, like, or Mom, when I'm playing, like, I don't really need any coaching from you when I'm playing. All right. At this point, when the game starts, it's like, let's just play. All right. And then we can discuss things afterwards. But I think it's just like, when an athlete is like having them as a distraction, it just takes them away from the game, which is not what the parent intends to do, but it can be something that happens a lot. And so it's just about creating like some of those kind of like soft boundaries between the parent and the athlete when they're playing. And those just take, communication, and just both sides communicating how they feel. And also, like, if the athlete's there, it's their game, right? And it's important for parents to have those boundaries of understanding, like, you know, when the game starts, like there's nothing I really can do. Like my son or daughter's not a robot, and even if I say pass left, shoot right, they're not gonna, honestly, they're not gonna do it. They're not gonna be even hearing you in the game. So just watching the game, let them enjoy it, and then maybe have an opportunity to discuss, you know, your thoughts and feelings afterwards. Elizabeth Adam mentioned imagery works best when you combine it with physical practice. Is there a specific way you suggest combining them? Yeah, I think I'll give an example of like, let's go back to a softball example as well. An opportunity for an athlete to practice imagery is when they're on deck, all right, and they're waiting for their turn to go up to the plate. And so they could like picture, like, you know, a certain pitch that they'd look for, you know, practice like going through the motion in their head of like, you know, what that situation is going to look like when they get up to the plate. I think, you know, for an example in soccer, for example, you could think of like when an athlete, say they have to take a penalty shot, all right, they could just kind of visualize in the goal of where they want the ball to end up in the goal, like the bottom right corner, the top left corner, or they could think of like visualize like what kind of foot contact they have to make on the ball if they're like kicking like an in-swinging free kick in. Just to have like sharp little quick image. It doesn't have to be like this huge sort of drawn out sort of kind of video in their mind, but it could just be something that's like, here's a snapshot of what I want to do. And it can be really effective in focusing their mind on what needs to happen in that moment. Awesome. Great. All right, well, if there's no more questions right now, please, I'll have my information with Alyssa, and I'm welcome to please reach out at any point if you have more questions of anything we talked about today. But thank you all for attending.
Sorry, everyone. I didn't realize I was on mute. Thank you, Geoff, for having us. And we want to welcome Alec for a closing prayer as he was able to join us.
Wonderful. Excellent.
And if you have any questions, feel free to email Geoff or I. Thank you, Masai. And we'll just unmute Alec.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay. First of all, Geoff, thank you for an awesome presentation in the past hour. And I just want to apologize to everybody for this lateness and technology and on and on. But I guess I just want to say that as a closing prayer, this past hour has offered us a lot of wonderful skills and knowledge and experience as teaching tools for where we go after this hour. And for us to go out into the field, to the world, using and applying all these wonderful teachings that we've heard in the past hour. Thank you, Creator, for the freedoms that you have provided us. Thank you for the belief and the history of a people that practice high levels of natural teachings. And we acknowledge the Creator for this past hour, and we look forward to continuing to offer a brighten our day and the safety that is out there for us to follow. Thank you, Creator, for your wonderful spirit. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everybody. And Geoff, I just took a penalty shot.
Wonderful. Thank you, Alec, for that, for the closing. And again, the video will be available through our website and our YouTube channel shortly in the coming weeks. And again, if you had any questions, feel free to send them to me. There will also be a feedback survey, and we look forward to those responses. And that's it for today. Thank you, everyone. Masai.